You've told me that Iran has been preparing for a war with America for decades. That is something that they've been getting ready for. Can you tell me how ready Iran is for a war with the United States?
Yeah, well, I don't know the details. We've seen actually video footage released by Iran of tunnels, very large tunnels underground, that are part of these underground missile facilities. And so they do have, all kinds of installations underground. And again, Iran is a large country, and much of it is very mountainous. So there are some of these facilities are deep within mountains, and they've had time to carve out these underground facilities. And they have studied the U.S. and have made strategic choices about how they're going to defend themselves and respond. But they have worked on the new technologies, which we found to be, drone technology and missile technology, hypersonic missiles, that kind of thing. And we don't know how many of these missiles they have, but there's no question that they have a considerable number, and they've demonstrated that these are very precise. Again, the U.S. has a lot of assets in the region that would be very vulnerable to missile attacks and drone attacks. So, yeah, they can, they have significant air defense. I'm sure there are holes in it. It's a very large country. It's probably not as good as the Russian air defense. The Russian air defense is supposed to be the best in the world. And, even though it's the best in the world, occasionally something gets through because it's a huge country, and no air defense, no matter how good it is 100%. So I think inevitably some things would get through and do some real damage to Iran, but it wouldn't be on the scale that, would cause them to surrender or anything close to that. And they would be able to retaliate in a, in very significant, potentially devastating fashion.
Okay, let's say we have planes, and we have these stealth bombers. They're flying over Iran to bomb Tehran or bomb some nuclear facility deep in the mountains. What is the likelihood of these planes being shot down?
Well, I think there's a significant likelihood. The stealth technology has been shown to be, far less than perfect. These planes are not invisible. They have a reduced profile on a radar system, but they can be detected. So I think it's quite likely that the let's say stealth bombers would be identified, detected as they cross into Iranian airspace or approach it. I mean, that's a story that we heard actually, that during the most recent attack by the Israelis, is that their planes were approaching Iran. This comes from Alistair Crook, who has some very good sources in the Middle East, including in Israel. And he was told that, as these planes approached Iran, they became aware that the Iranians had detected them. They had locked onto them. And, rather than risk being shot down, they turned around before crossing into Iranian airspace.
So then what they do is they go back and lie to the United States, saying, we got rid of all of their air defense systems. Now you guys go and do it. We already took care of it, and we'll be the ones that get shot down. Right. I mean, but we saw that footage of their Iran's air defenses prior, and they knocked everything down. And I imagine shooting down a cruise missile or a ballistic missile is much more difficult than shooting down a plane, which is slower moving and much larger. So the idea that they won't be able to shoot down these planes, I think, is ludicrous. That we could just fly over and bomb them with impunity is insane. I wouldn't be surprised if Iran shoots down all of these. And then on top of that, where are these planes being launched from? Oh, from USS Harry Truman or Diego Garcia? Well, Iran can just hit your aircraft carrier and hit that Diego Garcia base. And where are these planes going to even come back to if they even did make it to their target? It's like, I just feel like if I'm able to think about this, surely somebody in the Trump administration can think about this too. You have all these assets scattered throughout the Middle East that have very poor air defense or incapable air defense of stopping what the Iranians have. So it's just, we do this, all hell's going to break loose. We're just going to get humiliated throughout the Middle East. We will be blown out of the Middle East if we do this.
Yeah, I want to, first of all, just confirm what you said about the aircraft. Aircraft are much more vulnerable. That's a change. A couple decades ago, the aircraft had the edge. There were anti-air missiles. Of course, they've been around for many decades. But let's say an F-16 or whatever, a top-notch fighter jet could evade these. It would be scary. It would rely on some real skill on the part of the pilot, but they could evade them. And that's just not true anymore. That's what I've heard. It's just like you really can't evade these now. You can take every evasive, maneuver in the book, but it's gonna hit you, and bring your aircraft down. And we can see that actually in the Ukraine war, because the Russians have a very formidable air force, but they rarely fly over Ukrainian-held territory. They used to be that they stayed well back. Now they're getting closer just because Ukrainian air defenses have been so degraded, so they can get closer to the front line. But they still don't, I think with very rare exceptions, they don't fly over Ukrainian-held territories. They still have air defense. And, it's not what it was before, but it only takes one missile to bring down one of these planes. And, it's very revealing. I mean, that's just the nature of warfare these days. So, you're living in the past, right? You could, during the Persian Gulf War, the first Iraq War, we could fly over these territories and just unleash, huge numbers of bombs and devastate these countries before we moved in on the ground. And, that's the old war. That's not the new war that we're in, the new warfare that exists at the present time.
So right. The idea that Iran is naked is so absurd, in my opinion. Yeah, but I see it touted again and again. When I go on X, I see people say, they're going to find out. They don't have any air defense left. I see it stated by so many people. And it's insane to think that if you just, think about the things we've said,
right. Yeah, no, you're right. It's been 3 years of devastating missile strikes on Ukraine. And their air defense has been seriously degraded. Their energy infrastructure has been seriously degraded. It's just a fraction of what it used to be. But it took 3 years. And Ukraine is roughly the size and population of Iran.
Not population. Iran's like twice the population.
Okay, right. I was just going to say, exactly. So right. So the whole thing is just kind of completely fanciful.
It's insanity, and also Russia is just right there on the border of Ukraine. This is existential for them. Do you think that we're going to be able to build up a huge presence and base right there next to Iran to have continued operations?
Yeah, well, of course we do have some bases very close to them. Those are the Persian Gulf.
Obliterated.
Yeah, but that's right. But that cuts two ways. They're very close to Iran, and Iran, if they find themselves in an existential struggle, they'll take out those bases. They're they're within range of virtually all their missiles. That's a really short trip across the Gulf there. And Iran is held together for a long time under much greater stresses, like the Iran-Iraq War. That was that led to the death of from anywhere from 200,000 to 500,000 Iranians, and a lot of it through chemical weapons. And Iran held together, and they've held together, under years and years of sanctions. And Iran is now, in a lot of ways, is starting to turn the corner. They're coming in from the cold. They're developing these new relationships, and so I think it's really a pipe dream. You can never say anything's impossible, but it's virtually impossible that it's going to be successful.